Dr. Harry Kolar works for IBM, and he is working on some fascinating power projects and sensoring, protecting marine mammals primarily off the coast of Ireland. The coast of Ireland is full of very interesting, exciting marine mammals, and they are concerned not only with direct damage, but also with sound damage, with the audio effects of turbines in the water. Would that be a fair analysis?
Yes, there are a number of environmental parameters that are important, and they're part of the permitting process. So for ocean energy devices, whether they be tidal devices or they be wave energy devices, before permits can be issued for offshore and nearshore types of licenses, a fairly rigorous environmental impact assessment must be conducted. And within that period of time, which can be sometimes up to a year, a number of parameters have to be investigated. Some are tied to standards of different sort of bodies, regulatory bodies around the world, but not all are consistent. So that's one of the challenges right now for the industry to move forward, is how can you do that in a consistent fashion?
What is the sonic impact of a generator in the ocean? People don't think that it might make noise.
Well, they do. We know they make noise. We just don't know what the impact is. So number one is a consistent technology and methodology to actually measure the impact, or to measure the sound on an absolute scale. The other question is what does that do in terms of marine life?
What's the level of noise? Is it done in decibels, or is it?
Yeah, we normally measure in decibels, but again, there are varied machines right now which are in development at varied stages of development. So there are a few full-scale machines which are currently deployed, very few, and then there are other sort of scaling machines going up through a protocol where companies are investing and obviously testing their technology before they build a large machine.
Have you learned anything from the submarine experience? I was up in Puget Sound once where they were testing the sonic portrait of a submarine by putting it in basically in a tank, running the engines because they were trying to reduce the sonic signature.
So there's a lot of work in the underwater acoustics field from a military standpoint, no question about it. Much of that work, of course, we don't have access to. However, we do know that there are impacts on certain types of sea life. And that can be not only marine mammals, but also invertebrates and other fish. I just went to a conference on that actually recently, and they were talking about damage to ear cells and things like that for various invertebrates and different fish, and even to tropical coral from loud noises. Now that would be more extreme, things like pilings and underwater constructions rather than, let's say, a particular wave energy generation machine.
A wave energy generation machine, and I realize I'm asking you to do the impossible because they come in all shapes and sizes.
They do.
And they're not all deployed yet.
Correct.
But what sort of sound level are we talking about? 100 decibels?
I think it'd be less than that, but it will be in a specific
now, a symphony
frequency
orchestra
range.
is about 110, 120,
right.
Isn't it? An outboard engine's quite high. It
can
be
be
130
it can
decibels.
But there's also variation not only in the machines, but the geometry and obviously the physical environment. So some of the machines are deployed near shore, some are in deeper water, so it could be 10 meters of water, it could be 50, or deep water, 100 meters of water, and of course the sound characteristics and the impact will be different in those areas as well.
It's interesting, there were problems with sound and wind turbines.
Correct.
Cavitation, I think, was the exact cause, and by putting the turbine in the other end, they reduced it. They didn't eliminate it totally.
You still have a transfer down through the pilings. That's correct. That's still an issue in the offshore wind industry.
How did you get into sound engineering?
Well, we got into it by actually a precursor project with the Marine Institute called the Smart Bay, which was also in Galway Bay, to extend their monitoring systems, which they're a pretty advanced oceanographic and marine coastal research group, and they also support the Irish sort of maritime economy, and fishermen, aquaculture, areas like that. And we were extending their monitoring infrastructure to sort of the next generation system. So it's actually a research and development test bed, which has also now been recognized as a national resource from the Irish government and is further expanding over the next few years. This piece of work that we were doing started actually looking at the acoustics of marine mammals to understand if we could classify them, and someday actually do more specific things like counting them for population monitoring and things like that.
How do you ask a fish what it's hearing?
It's mostly done by cause and effect, right? To look and see what kind of impact, if there are changes in behavioral patterns. Again, I'm not a biologist nor an expert in that area, but at least these are the things I'm told they actually study. So how patterns might change, feeding patterns might change, how particular animals may come to an area, may be attracted by noise or repelled by noise. So there's a wide variation depending on species.
Sort of rather like heat in the water, it can attract and repel.
Same thing, yes.
Same idea.
Varied effects.
People don't think of IBM as worrying about fish.
Well, I mean,
it's not, our picture of IBM
Yes.
is about business machines, followed by computers, followed by consulting.
Sure, we do many different things. Obviously, I'm with IBM Research, and we look at the applications of technologies to many different problems. I just happen to be working in the sort of environmental monitoring space, and again, looking at sort of end-to-end architecture to actually support industries and governments and other entities that are working in this
What
space.
is your own discipline?
Physics and material science.
That's very
A
interesting.
far cry from acoustic.
Indeed. Are you
underwater acoustics.
excited about what you've seen of developing power plants in the ocean?
Very much so. It's very exciting. It's a very interesting industry because it's very, very new, obviously. The potential for a country like Ireland, who imports over 80% of their energy, obviously is a massive importance for energy independence. Obviously, it's a clean and renewable resource, and the technologies that people are bringing to bear, coupled with sort of the large-scale marine-level engineering to ensure that these machines would stay in the water for 20 years under harsh conditions, which they must be natively suited for, is very interesting.
So presumably there'll be lots of spin-offs.
We would hope so. I would think you would see a lot of different industries. It's a very large ecosystem. If you would look at the type of industry, we often refer to how it's sort of contributing to the knowledge economy of countries like Ireland as well. So we're developing new technologies in conjunction with government agencies, independent laboratories, smaller companies as well as universities and institutions.
Are you active in other countries besides Ireland?
We are in similar projects for environmental monitoring. We just started a project actually which was announced publicly in Norway with offshore oil and gas company Statoil, which is a big company. Same sort of thing, obviously not for ocean energy, but for the oil and gas offshore industry. So monitoring a number of different environmental parameters, which they already do, but they're trying to move it to even more
Are we
sophisticated
doing any of
system.
this work in the US? Are we taking a look at our own marine life and the
There
potential impact?
There are a number of projects that are in the U.S. coupled to, say, ocean energy as well. Perhaps not quite as comprehensive as what we've done at this point in time, but I think that will come with time. And again, there are many agencies that are also involved as well as universities.
And whatever you discover in Ireland actually probably has application elsewhere in the world.
Absolutely.
It can be modified for local conditions.
Absolutely.
elsewhere.
In fact, a byproduct of this particular project, which is in 2 phases over a couple of years, is that we will probably have one of the largest corpus of data, of marine underwater data, continuously recorded anywhere outside of the military in the world. So that will actually be, even though it's data that comes from this project and the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, it will actually be turned over to the Marine Institute of Ireland for scientific purposes.
Where did you study physics?
Arizona State University, in the middle of the desert.
In the middle of the desert, did you
right.
ever think you would be worrying about the well-being of fish in Ireland?
Nope, I couldn't have predicted
It's
this
a
one.
wonderful world, isn't it?
It is.
It's a
Thank you
great
very
pleasure
much.
to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Great
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Very interesting.
Thank you.